Hi everyone, my name is Tyler and I'm here to help you get into your new 40k army. 40k as a hobby can be very expensive to get into, but my goal with this series is to help you get a full army going without having to break the bank. Before we dive into the list, let's talk about some basic rules that we're going to be using for the list building process here. Our first goal is going to be to keep it affordable and utilize box deals. For everything that we're going to be looking at today, we're going to be looking at it from an MSRP value from Games Workshop themselves. Now, I don't recommend buying everything MSRP from Games Workshop. Often, local hobby stores, eBay, Amazon, things of that nature will have much better deals for the kits that I'm about to show you. Our second goal is that we're going to be making the list in steps, starting at 500 points and working our way up to 1,000 points, 1,500 points, and 2,000 points. Our third rule is we're going to be avoiding Forge World and Finecast. Many Forge World models are often very pricey for the points that they provide you on the table, and the resin used can be hard to work with, especially for beginners. As far as Finecast goes, I just don't think that they're quite as high quality as the plastic models that you can get otherwise. Our fourth goal is to aim to make lists with decent competitive viability. We're going to be trying to make lists that can do well at casual tournaments, in your games with friends, or maybe even get you some wins at major tournaments. Our fifth and final rule is the most important one. Just because I don't mention a model in my list, it doesn't mean that it isn't good. The most important thing that you can do is collect models that you think are cool. There's an entire side of the hobby that has nothing to do with playing, and if you don't like the models you're painting and building, you're not going to get the most out of this hobby. Today, we're going to be talking about the Astra Militarum, also known as the Imperial Guard. The Astra Militarum are effectively the lifeblood of the Imperium army. They are the billions upon billions of soldiers that the Imperium uses in their day-to-day warfare. They are born soldiers who will spend their entire lives doing army drills from the time they are 6 until they are full adults enlisted in the army. The entire army has this kind of World War I/World War II aesthetic. Lots of military mortars, flak armor, loose helmets, that type of thing. The Astra Militarum win battles through their sheer numbers and unrelenting firepower. They might not be the best soldiers the Imperium has, but they are the most soldiers the Imperium has. In a universe of elves that move faster than you can perceive, super soldiers who are borderline demigods, alien robots that can destroy stars in an instant and capture gods, the Astra Militarum are the equivalent of Steve from accounting holding an AK-47. So why might you want to collect the Astra Militarum? Well, you might love the World War II, World War I style aesthetic and just think that it's super cool, which it is. They also just got a kit refresh, so the models look great across most of the range. They do still have quite a few models that are in Finecast or resin or even metal, but the plastic models are very, very nice for a lot of the bog standard units that you would be wanting to buy. Imperial Guard, because of their numbers, are also a horde army, which tend to be very, very good at playing the mission, whether it's flooding objectives, sticking up the map, or doing secondaries. They kind of take the Zap Brannigan style of battle, where they will just throw wave after wave of men at the enemy until the fight is won. The Guard also have an absolutely huge range of datasheets, which is going to give them tons of options for your army building. They have lots of low-costed units that you can use to protect your more valuable units by either screening or move blocking or just creating pressures with firing lanes. And if you love the idea of using indirect fire to shoot people that you can't even see, the Guard has that in troves. But there are reasons that you might want to avoid collecting the Astra Militarum. First off, they are a very expensive army. Their mechanized lists are usually more affordable, but infantry spamming lists are easily above $1,300, $1,400, maybe even $1,500 depending on just how hard you want to go. Almost every single infantry unit, including the infantry characters that you need to buff those infantry units, are about 1 point per dollar. Some range at around 1.2, maybe 1.3, and some drop as low as being 0.8 points per dollar, meaning that you are spending more money than you are getting points on the tabletop. Not very good for a 2,000 point army. The army also doesn't tend to have very good defensive profiles. Their units usually have either a worse save, lower armor, or less wounds than other armies might have for similar units. Imperial Guard also tends to struggle a little bit to kill things in melee. You do have some units that are able to fight in melee worth a little bit of salt, but for the most part you are a shooting army and you are going to be shooting people. That said, as a shooting army, they don't have the greatest consistency at hitting at range. They really do need volume of fire to make up for it. Thankfully, they do have that volume of fire, but be ready to throw a lot of dice and take about half of them away. The army rule for the Astra Militarum is voice of command. Units in the Astra Militarum army that are registered as officers and have the officer keyword are able to give out orders to other units nearby to improve their stats, because otherwise a lot of the Astra Militarum units have pretty lackluster stats. Now normally it's within an aura of 6 inches, but you have units that have little abilities that they can take that will stretch that out to 24 inches. A lot of these are kind of good utility bonuses, like adding 3 inches to a move or increasing the objective control. And you do have a few that are related to combat. Overall, it's a pretty powerful army rule, but it does require you build your lists in certain ways in order to get the maximum effect out of everything. The detachment rule for Astra Militarum, on the other hand, is very simple. It is born soldiers. Every time a unit in your army attacks, if they did not move, they will automatically wound on a 6 to hit. It's pretty simple. Now, I don't necessarily love this detachment rule because 40k is a game about board control and moving up the board and getting angles to hit things, which means that you're not often going to be standing still and shooting. It's very good for your indirect weapons, which is part of why Guard succeeds as an indirect firing army, but it is a little lackluster, and I wish that GW had come up with something a little bit better for a general Guard army. Now, I want to take a quick moment to mention the Cadian Defense Force Battleforce Box that came out last Christmas. It might be a little bit tricky for you to be able to find, but if you can get your hands on one, it is going to be a phenomenal pickup for you. It's going to be having the 2 Rogel Dorns, which are going to be seen in the first list that I'm going to show you, and really aren't a bad thing to have 2 of. It's also going to be giving you plenty more infantry, more shock troops, depending on how you want to build them, and it'll also be giving you an extra platoon squad in case you want it. If you're able to pick this up, you can kind of cut out one of the combat patrols, more or less. The contents of the box itself run around $345 because of all of the little extra stuff that you're going to be getting in it, but if you can find it for around $230 to $275, it's probably going to be a good pickup for you, even if you don't necessarily want that second command squad. Now, for all 3 lists that we're going to be looking at today, we're going to be starting off the exact same way. We're going to be picking up the Combat Patrol for the Astra Militarum, and we're going to be picking up a Lehman Russ battle tank. Now, the one thing that I want to tell you is right now the field ordnance batteries inside of the Combat Patrol are not very good. But between the 2 units of infantry, the command squad, and the sentinel, we are actually going to still be saving money even without the ordnance batteries. The ordnance batteries are mostly going to be there to help us fluff out points and save a little bit of money down the line, but you will probably replace them as soon as you can. When we look at the list itself, we're going to be having the platoon squad have a plasma pistol, power weapon, plasma gun, master vox, medipack, and regimental standard, as you're able to take a lot of veterans that have different profiles and kind of swap some guns around. For the battle line, we're going to be running one 10-man unit of infantry squad with plasma pistol, power weapon, las cannon, vox caster, plasma gun, and las guns. Important to note is that when you are looking at a Astra Militarum army, they do not actually have any kits right now for regular infantry squads. This is kind of a relic of an older time. So what you're going to need to do is take those 20 Cadian infantry that are going to be coming in the box, give them a little bit of a different paint scheme, give them a little bit of different equipment if you can, or you'll have to buy third party in order to fill this role. Now, looking at the field ordnance batteries, we're going to be giving them the heavy las cannon. One of the builds I'm going to show you later will be using something a little bit different, and I think it shouldn't be too bad to magnetize these in order to swap them out on different bases depending on which gun you need, but just be aware that you are going to want to be able to switch these around at least a little bit. Now the Leman Russ is going to be built as a Leman Russ Demolisher with 2 multi-meltas, a heavy stubber, a hunter killer missile, and a las cannon. The Demolisher is a great overall tool, but make sure that, just like with most vehicles, you are magnetizing your Leman Russ. You want to be able to customize this more later so that you can actually swap out for the different loadouts when they become better or worse. And finally, the Scout Sentinel is going to be equipped with a las cannon, hunter killer missile, and a sentinel chainsaw. I'm going to have a link in the description to a video that shows you how you can swap out a lot of pieces for the Sentinel pretty easily, but it looks like the general consensus is always build your Sentinels as Scout Sentinels, because the Armored Sentinel carapace, armor, covering, whatever you want to call it, can just very neatly fit on top of the Scout Sentinel roll cage. Now the first list that I have for you is going to be a lot more focused on those big, heavy tanks. It's kind of the style that I like a little bit more for the Astra Militarum, personally. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be picking up 1 Chimera, 1 Leman Russ, 1 Rogel Dorn, and 1 unit of Bolgrins. When we move over and we look at the list, we can see that we're going to be having a Tank Commander with Demolisher Battle Cannon, Heavy Stubber, Hunter Killer Missile, las cannon, and 2 multi-meltas. We can also see that we're going to be having the Bolgrin squad be equipped with the Brute Shield and the Bolgrin Maul. We're going to be having the Rogel Dorn equipped with 2 Melta-Guns, 2 multi-meltas, a Presser Cannon, Coaxial Cannon, and a Pulverizer Cannon. And the Chimera is going to be equipped with the Chimera Heavy Flamer, Regular Heavy Flamer, Heavy Stubber, and Hunter Killer Missile. This is going to give us a nice little decision on whether or not we want to transport the Bolgrins up the board, or if we want to transport the infantry squad up the board. Now, one thing that I have to mention about this is if we do decide to transport infantry squads with our Chimeras, it means that our platoon squad is going to have to be disattached from the unit. It's not a great thing to do, but I think that the transports are very important for Guard in order to actually get a lot of their infantry up the board. And you can, as far as I can tell, still give out orders to different units with the platoon squad as long as they are within range with those Voxcasters that they have. Now, as we look at the 1500 point list, what we're going to be doing is picking up some of the good support units that are going to be building up the rest of our army. We're going to be picking up another Leman Russ battle tank and another Scout Sentinel, but to add on to that, we're going to be picking up 1 unit of Gaunt's Ghosts, we're going to be picking up a Tech Priest Engine Seer, and we're going to be grabbing Lord Solar Leontis. Now, Gaunt's Ghosts are going to have the Lone Up keyword, so they're going to be great for doing a lot of secondary actions or standing on objectives to force your opponent to come out and deal with them. Lord Solar Leontis is just a great general buff piece. The Enginemental Engine Seer is going to be able to keep your Rogel Dorn up or your Leman Russ battle tanks, and the second Leman Russ is going to be built as an Eradicator with 2 multi-meltas, a Heavy Stubber, a Hunter Killer Missile, and a las cannon. Now, at 2,000 points, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be picking up a second Rogel Dorn battle tank. We're going to be picking up our 4th Leman Russ battle tank box. And we're also going to be picking up 1 box of Tempestus Scions to act as that good mission play secondary objective unit. This third Leman Russ that we're going to have in our vehicle section is going to be built as an Exterminator with 2 multi-meltas, a Heavy Stubba, a Hunter Killer Missile, and a las cannon. Now, the Exterminator is going to be that great support piece for the rest of our shooting army, as anything that gets hit by it is going to be able to take a -1 AP to any other attacks from other units. So you really want to lead with the Exterminator first, and then follow up with the rest of your heavier hitting shots. Past that, the second Rogel Dorn is going to be equipped with the exact same stuff, and the Tempestus Scions don't really care what you equip them with, because you're probably just going to drop them in, have them do an action, and then they're probably going to die. But just in case, give them a Voxcaster, Plasma Pistol, Power Fist, and a Plasma Gun, because why not? Now, the second style of Astra Militarum list that I have for you is a little bit more infantry focused. It's still not a fully infantry army, as I mentioned earlier, that would be far too expensive, but we are going to be seeing a little bit more of those battle line units. What we're going to be doing is picking up one Chimera, we're going to be picking up a Rogaldorn battle tank, and we're going to be picking up a second combat patrol. And we're going to be using this second combat patrol over time and adding it in little bit by little bit. When we look at the way this is going to be set up, we're going to be using the Tank Commander with Demolisher Battle Cannon, Grand Strategist, Heavy Stubber, Hunter Killer Missile, Las Cannon, and 2 Multi-Meltas. He's going to be there for most of these lists. But in the battle line, we can see that we're actually going to have 2 units of the Infantry Squad and 1 unit of Cadian Shock Troops. Now, the Cadian Shock Troops are mostly there because at this point in the list building process, we don't really have any good backline objective holders unless we want to run a 3rd infantry squad and just have them sit on the backline all game. Totally fine, you can make that happen, but I wanted to be able to use their rule for objective secured so that you can get all of your units up the battlefield, since at 1,000 points, every little bit counts that much more. The Rogaldorn is going to be equipped with all the same things that we saw in the previous list: 2 Melta-Guns, 2 Multi-Meltas, a Pressor Cannon, Coaxial Cannon, Pulverizer Cannon, and then the Chimera is going to be equipped with its Heavy Flamer, a regular Heavy Flamer, a Heavy Stubber, and a Hunter Killer Missile. Now, because we planned ahead with the previous purchase of picking up that second combat patrol, we only have 3 boxes that we need to pick up this time. It's going to be 1 Leman Russ battle tank, then we're going to be picking up 1 Chimera, and we're going to be rounding it off with Lord Solar Leontis. Now, as I mentioned before, Lord Solar Leontis is mostly going to be here as a good buff piece. Thankfully, because we're moving up to the 1500 points, we're able to fit in all 4 units of our infantry. You can either run them as 4 infantry squads if you want, or you can have 3 infantry squads and 1 Cadian shock troop. It really doesn't matter, they're the exact same points, pick whichever one you like more. Might be easier to just run 4 units of infantry and have them all be the same paint scheme. The Leman Russ is going to be built as a Demolisher with 2 Multi-Meltas, a Heavy Stubber, Hunter Killer Missile, and a Las Cannon, and then the second Chimera is going to have the exact same loadout as the first. Now, to round it out, we're going to have 2 more smaller purchases. We're going to be picking up 1 more Leman Russ battle tank, and then we're going to be picking up 1 final Rogaldorn battle tank. Now, I know this is a little bit lighter on the infantry than you might have been expecting, but again, I cannot stress this enough. Infantry are not cost efficient. They are good to pick up over time and from extra boxes and combat patrols and other good deals, but you do not want to be going out and buying boxes of infantry if you can help it. Now, at the 2,000 point list, we're going to be having 2 units of the Platoon Command Squad alongside the regular battle line of whichever variation of Cadian Shock Troops and infantry squads that you want. Then we're also going to be having the Leman Russ be built as an Exterminator. The second Rogaldorn is going to have the exact same loadout as the first, and that's going to kind of round this out nicely. Now, the third style that I have for you today is going to be all about indirect fire and making your opponent feel as miserable as they can as you blast them from behind walls. To achieve this, we're going to be picking up 1 Chimera. We're going to be following it up with 1 more Leman Russ battle tank. We're going to be picking up a Manticore, and we're going to be picking up a Basilisk. Now, the Manticore did just take a points nerf in the most recent balanced data slate, going from 150 to 180 points, which is pretty sizable. But if you want to be running an indirect spamming guard list, you really don't have a much better alternative. The Basilisk is good, and the Manticore is good. And the other options are a little weak right now unless you want to start looking at things like Forge World. So for this part of the list, we're going to be having the Platoon Squad with a regular loadout, the Tank Commander with its regular loadout, the regular Infantry Squad, but for the Basilisk, it's going to have the Heavy Flamer and Hunter Killer Missile. The Leman Russ Demolisher is going to be 2 Multi-Meltas, Heavy Stubber, Hunter Killer Missile, and a Las Cannon. The Manticore is going to be with a Heavy Bolter and a Hunter Killer Missile. And the Chimera is going to have its Chimera Heavy Flamer, Heavy Flamer, Heavy Stubber, and Hunter Killer Missile. At 1500 points, we're going to be picking up Lord Solar Leontis, and we're going to be picking up a second Combat Patrol. Now, as I stated earlier, as long as you're getting most of the value out of the Combat Patrol, it's actually a pretty solid pickup. We don't love having this many duplicate units of certain things. The second platoon squad isn't great. We don't really want the 2 heavy ordnance batteries, but they are passable for now. And who knows, maybe down the line the field ordnance batteries will actually be good and you'll be glad that you have this. But for just the scouts and the infantry, it's not too bad. Now, we can see that we're currently only going to be using 3 of the infantry squads that we are capable of taking. We could potentially take out one of the platoon command squads and put in a 4th infantry squad. That is entirely your discretion. It's going to give you a little bit better board control, a little bit worse orders, just kind of depends on what you're feeling like. But the 2 scout sentinels are going to have the exact same loadout here. To finish it off at 2,000 points, we're just going to be picking up 3 more boxes. We're going to be picking up 1 more Basilisk, we're going to be picking up 1 more Manticore, and while I don't love it on its points efficiency, we are going to be picking up 1 more Sentinel. And we're going to test 1 final Chimera in there just for good measure. Now we're going to be able to finally fit all 4 of our battle line units. We aren't going to be having any of the batteries in this list. If you wanted to, you could potentially cut 1 infantry unit and 1 scout sentinel to have an indirect fire battery, but I don't think that's very worth it, especially because since this list is going to be running 2 basilisks and 2 manticores alongside the tank commander, you really do want to make sure that you're able to screen for your army. Having 3 scout sentinels that can move up the board more quickly and kind of get in the way of your opponent before they really have a good chance to stop your game plan. And those are going to be the 3 lists that I have for you today. Now, when we go over and we take a look at the tier list, it's probably going to surprise you that for how expensive the Astra Militarum are, they are going to slot right between the Orcs and the Votan in the $900 to $1,050 tier. It was really shocking to me to see this for myself, but when I looked at it and I realized just how many tanks and heavy mechs we were running in that first pickup, I realized that we were able to save quite a bit of money. If you wanted to run a heavy infantry style list, this would very easily be in that 1050 tier behind Sisters, and it might even get into AdMech tier for maybe some of the more affordable AdMech armies. But for now, with what we have for getting yourself started with Astra Militarum, it's not as bad as you might have thought. And that's all that I have for you today. This was a very interesting one to work on because it really did beat my expectations. But now that we've got the balanced data slate and now that things have kind of cooled down a little bit, we're going to actually be able to start looking at more codex-based armies. I sent out a poll a few weeks ago before we saw all of the balanced data slate stuff in order to kind of get myself ready for what we were going to be seeing next, and you guys all voted for the Tyranids. So that is going to be the next army that we take a look at. Because it is a Codex army, it's going to be handled a little bit differently, and we're going to be looking at somewhere between 2 to 3 detachments. So keep an eye out for it, and I will see you in the next one.